What is up, guys? Welcome back to Think Shank. Today, we're going to jump into the very, very hotly discussed question and controversy surrounding the current NBA ratings. The product sucks. We're all screwed. This game is ruined. There's too many threes. There are no fun storylines, and there's no American-born player who's going to save us all like the Messiah, and everything is hopeless, and yada, yada. Honestly, it's just so exhausting because I have genuinely tried to scour the internet and find a thoughtful, detailed explanation behind where and why these thoughts and feelings permeate everywhere, where they come from, how they are constructed, and it feels like a bunch of people throwing a temper tantrum because what got them off in the past just isn't hitting the same way. Much like all of our dopamine levels in this godforsaken dystopian society. Potential foreshadowing for how I feel about this entire thing, but I am trying to keep this as direct and short as possible. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. There is one overarching driver that I don't see a ton of people spotlighting. The punchline is, I think that today's NBA is just harder to appreciate for specifically more casual fans. And it's because the what behind the product has evolved such that the why and the how is both much, much more important to being successful, and it's also just much more complicated. Actually understanding why and how certain teams are good and certain teams are not is more complex to figure out and understand, and thus it just requires more time and effort to kind of get familiar, and therefore being able to recognize certain things a couple levels deeper that therefore might deliver a similar level of dopamine and just enjoyment and excitement around the what of the actual product. Today is like an earthquake that has followed decades worth of slow, methodical tectonic plates shifting without any of us noticing. And it just reaches a critical mass where all of a sudden we don't know what the fuck is going on, but you look back, much like a landscape in Southern California per se, with these beautiful, enormous mountains that clearly came from the tectonic plate shift over eons of time. You look back and it's like, holy shit, things have actually changed a lot. Back with D'Antoni and Nash and Stoudemire with their pick and rolls that absolutely changed a lot of the offensive strategy for many, many teams, followed by the Heatles and the birth of the super teams, and you could really just stack talent like in a linear line and you can overwhelm teams with it. Then we have pace and space, courtesy of Steve Kerr and Steph Curry, the greatest shooter to ever live, and their incredible in-house development program of identifying Clay as well as Steph, and then, of course, the miraculous genius behind Draymond Green and all of this crazy movement, which then incites the broader league to just start chucking a million threes, because how are you going to stand a chance against the Warriors when they are just going to chuck a ton of threes as well? But of course, it's a numbers game that they have a leg up on you at, because again, they can shoot better than you can. Then in response to that, at the turn of the second decade of the century, is the stonewalling perimeter, switch everything defensive models that, of course, the Boston Celtics are utilizing to the nth degree with an immaculate collection of incredible two-way talent when it comes to synthesizing those two ideas. Have a ton of shooters that can also defend the other team's perimeter shooters better than pretty much anyone else. In the midst of all of that, we have the death of the traditional power forward and post play, and of course, layups or threes, the Mike D'Antoni Rockets, with pretty much the most efficient offenses in NBA history between three-pointers, layups, and free throws is really the only way that they score. And piloted by in his own right, generational talent of James Harden that was able to just synthesize so much efficiency on the offensive end by just arm barring referees and officials, bending some of the rules in the rule books, and being an unbelievably borderline unprecedented isolation scorer at that specific time, and the overall depletion of that inner membrane between the perimeter and paint. So now you have essentially a league-wide ecosystem that has been running its simulation over and over and over again with pioneering efforts that has just unlocked new frontiers to the point where there is a mathematically backed ideology for posting efficient and effective offenses in the NBA. It is literally data-driven offense, and it is borderline indisputable, which of course lends itself to broader and higher-level questions about the current apparatus and mechanisms inside of the broader NBA and whether they need to be changed. But the point here is simply the league has, one, changed dramatically from just 2 decades ago, which is connected to the second point, which is it changed very, very dramatically in a very short time frame. Kind of in a weird way, its own microcosm of broader societal trends where I don't think anybody feels really like they understand what's going on at all anymore, and there's too much of it going on all the time, and we just end up being pretty disillusioned and depressed. So great. I don't know why I started going down that rabbit hole. So that is just the organic product evolution. Like, there is increasingly a more correct way to offensively play this game, which is in a box. And outside of the box, you have external enhancers of more and more talent objectively getting injected into the league, leads to a bunch of guys that can kind of deliver on that increasingly more ubiquitous offensive model of pace and space and threes and layups and no mid-ranges and everyone can pass, and more skilled players that can bring to life the model that more teams recognize as being just better as far as efficient and effective offense is concerned, and then cue in the CBA, which is, of course, the biggest and broadest external enhancer of this dramatic shift, which is basically implemented very, very restrictive penalties at a strategic, not just financial level for teams that are trying to basically buy their way towards dominating the league. And so now it results in the same outcome for that product, which I talked about at length in previous videos. The death of heliocentrism as a viable and sustainable model, particularly offensively, when you think about actually winning a championship or just very, very deep playoff contention. You see guys like Donovan Mitchell, who has been more than willing to defer and empower his co-star in Darius Garland, which was an enormous fuel behind their incredible undefeated start deep into the season. Luka Doncic, where the Mavs had historically performed super, super well in clutch time games. But of course, the Mavericks get started this season really off on the wrong foot in those kinds of situations. And Luka was caught towards the end of games really not delivering offensively or defensively, but primarily with the offensive side is he kind of was chucking a million fucking shots, and similar with Anthony Edwards, and you get a little more pushback than historically where, yeah, old heads are like, well, he's the best player, fucking prove it. And then now it's like, no, dumbass, fucking pass the ball and make a play. You can't expect to penetrate these very fortified defenses as a one-man show and actually deliver against really, really competitive opponents. So when you have that death of heliocentrism just due to the level of talent and opponent strength, and of course you are more restricted as far as operations go with trades and player roster fluctuation and flexibility, you ultimately just end up with much greater parity across the league, as well as a much bigger emphasis on team level, not individual level strategy and innovative ideas to elevate the broader team's success, which increasingly takes the form of reeling back the superstars from their traditional mindset of doing everything and driving everything and actually allowing other players to get going and establish a rhythm in the game and basically trusting each other a lot more, and to actually deploy those broader strategies. It will just innately be more complex and more complicated for, again, your more casual fans to have to invest some time and energy to actually familiarize themselves with what is going on. And that relates to that why/how being much more important as well as complex. If there's more parity, we're talking about a game of inches, a few bad turnovers, a few bad hero ball shots, etc., etc. But everything that is keeping those games so tight is usually going to be due to much more complex schemes, principles, etc., that are just going to be harder to identify if you are not at all invested in the actual league and how the game is played at a more intimate level. That's just the product level outcome there. That's just what is on the actual screen when we're watching it. So all of that is just inside of the outcome for the specific product. That is the what. And now situate that product in the box and looking around the broader landscape as far as the market it is situated inside of, and the broader audience groups and potential audience groups and consumers of that product. What we are witnessing is a shift in the value proposition in the eyes of consumers or potential consumers of the NBA product away from superstar and towards system. The league clearly wants more parity and is wary of high-spending teams dominating the landscape and buying their way to titles. There have been a lot of comparisons to the March Madness model where there's a lot more volatility, a lot more team level strategy, a game of inches. You got to win every 50-50 balls, never turn the ball over and dive everywhere and break your fucking legs off. But when you take a step back and think about it, does anyone actually know anything at an individual level during March Madness? No, it's all about the team storylines. The really good ones only stay a year, and that means that all of these super scrappy, lower-ish in talent or evenly matched teams, once it gets deeper into the tournament, it's all about the team. And you just jump in and root for them, and that's great. But you understand my point is more parity is going to emulate that kind of a consumer experience at a very, very high level, setting aside the really disgustingly invested sickos like myself. It begs the question, if that is such an enormous payoff in a league where there's such high parity, how is the regular season viewed in the NCAA? The answer is not super great because it doesn't fucking matter until the tournament. You can see the precarious situation. The product itself has organically evolved, kind of like team executives and coaches just stumbled into an objectively better way to be more effective and efficient. And as a result of that, the teams themselves have become much more even-keeled with each other, which has been exacerbated by those external factors like the new CBA, as well as just more talent coming into the league, has led to just more and more parity, which then, subliminally or not, shifts how the product is positioned in the market when you think about what is driving its actual value proposition to consumers. You're not watching the NBA to watch LeBron James put up 40, 15, and 12 as he just shits all over the Pistons on a random Thursday. That's not happening. Now it's about parity and an absolute gridlock between those same Pistons in 2025 against the fucking Rockets, who are still somehow second in the Western Conference, in an all-out bruising blood match that is gruesome and very, very competitive, because obviously that is what the league has engineered, because they believe that that is what the consumers want. So we are shifting away from superstars to a more system-oriented model when it comes to what is driving the value proposition of that organically evolved NBA product. I'm so sorry that takes me so many fucking words to say. I don't know how to say it more simply. Go ahead and comment or fucking at me on Twitter the right way to say this in a way that won't make me sound fucking out of my mind or condescending or like I'm trying to sound smart. I'm not. I'm literally not. So why does that ultimately matter? So the product evolving and then therefore its market position evolving all happened completely distinctly and separately from changes in the consumer's preferences for what they actually want. It was more of a, oh, this is cool, we'll tag along, until it is left kind of unchecked to a point where it is unrecognizable and doesn't really deliver on that initial or traditional kind of dopamine hit, if you will, of incredible tough shot making and blah, 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 blah. There is definitely a grassroots sentiment of disconnect between the audience of like, what the hell happened to the thing that I loved? It's just running amok and out of control. And those underlying feelings are being exacerbated and amplified by this new surrounding environment that has never, ever been more primed to amplify dissent and backlash towards shitting on shit just all the time. It just sells and sells and sells. It's kind of a damper and downer indicator for us as a society. Completely separate train of thought there. It makes me sad how much people want to see everything just sucking. I don't know why that's a good way to live your life, but alas, a huge component of the media's business model is rooted in controversy and dissent and tearing things down, and everybody likes to build people up to tear them down and yada yada. It sells really well. B, social media is literally designed to amplify that dissent that is potentially completely ungrounded or is actually only held or believed by a super small minority. There is such an overwhelmingly imbalanced ratio of the volume of content versus the amount of content that a singular human being in the United States can reasonably expect to actually see inside of this enormous swath of shit. So therefore, the algorithms that pump shit out, they are literally just designed for their own internal purposes, which is to get you to continue to interact and engage and yada yada, which again, you can see I'm building here. Everybody loves controversy. Everybody loves to shit on shit. And the tools and mechanisms with which we use to intake and outtake information are also trying to get people to engage in their shit and give them money and yada yada, which just means pumping out even more controversy and hate towards stuff that, again, might literally not even be founded in reality or fact or data, nor even actually believed by who's ever posting it or a majority of people. It's just about amplifying stuff that the media is trying to profit off of, and then the platforms that the media is using to transmit all this shit are trying to get out of you. Leads to see consumers overall being so much less curious, but somehow more insatiable for just shit to just distract them, probably from the woeful realities of broader life and society. Nobody cares about investigating shit on their own terms. Everybody is at a dopamine diminishment where I need to be stimulated constantly, because if I'm not, I actually have to use my brain and then scary things happen. If people are genuinely less curious about figuring out if anything that anybody is saying is true or actually felt by a lot of people, and at the same time, they're just more and more insatiable and starved of these dopamine hits and just constant stimulation all day, to stand out, the media and the platforms and whatever just constantly have to be filling this kind of void that works in a positive feedback loop that everybody is well aware of. I'm sorry, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. To tie it all back now to the NBA, this is basically a perfect breeding ground for a shitstorm of hate that the media and normal people are just jumping all over as if it's an enormous, crippling issue that is extremely relevant and chronic to figure out and overcome. To tie it back now, the product itself evolving, the market position of that product inherently evolving as a result, and those two things taking place separately from what the viewer's actual preferences have been as far as which value proposition is actually more captivating towards them. That disconnect has been happening for a while. And now, when it reaches a sort of boiling point and some people suddenly start pointing out, what the hell happened to this thing that I loved? Why is it out of control? The actual environment, whether it's a minority or not, is just inviting them to sow doubt in the actual league. And so pivoting now to what I actually think about it. First off, it is very clear that the shift in the value proposition, are you watching for the superstars and the dynasties? Are you watching for actual team strategy, maximizing rosters, role players delivering, well-executed fucking plays and shit? That's a different sort of thing in the market, and it brings risks for casual fans. Kind of a risk to constant growth when, again, things are more complicated, and actually understanding the game and some of the strategy inside of it just requires time and effort that broader, normal, casual consumers just don't give enough of a shit to do. But what it risks in growth potential has to be put against the potential upside in more entrenching already invested fans into an increasingly evened playing field and more competitive one, where teams are really tasked with winning in the margins and maximizing utility players and being smart with their strategies. For example, in the NBA Cup, semifinals? When was the last time anybody was at all excited to watch Oklahoma City and Houston play each other? 2015? Probably. That's a fucking decade. Think about that. That game was really fucking competitive, and all you hear about from the talking heads and media members was, oh my God, the Thunder are so clearly in their own echelon in the Western Conference. This isn't even gonna be close. It is actually still pretty fucking competitive and pretty compelling to watch these teams try to figure it out. It is not, again, so simple as good team, bad team. That chasm is really not a chasm any longer. And here's my favorite litmus test of all. How many members of the media that aren't making a 7-figure paycheck are actually complaining about the new NBA? Or the ones just under the age of 50? Yes. Making more parity and more of the emphasis around team level strategy at the expense of superstars that are super easy to latch onto might be, to some extent, offset by further entrenching the already invested fans, or the ones that aren't succumbing to mindless stimulation and don't have the attention span of a fucking gerbil to actually give enough of a shit to learn about what it takes to win. That is the difference. I'm not saying it is going to financially offset in the slightest that kind of subliminal divide. I don't like to use that term, but I actually think it's going to get increasingly more clear that that is what it is, between casual fans complaining versus the freaks who are like, look at fucking Memphis's lack of pick and rolls and the fact that they have the highest pace in the league and all they want to do is just shoot right away and they're all super connected off ball and otherwise. Everybody knows about that at this point. But for the pretty invested fans, that is a pretty interesting wrinkle. And these kinds of things are what gets you more and more rooted into the product, potentially for a longer span of time. So if you are Adam Silver, are you more willing to sacrifice potentially more growth potential for better entrenching of already invested or near invested fans, where there is added depth in layers to a more evenly leveled playing field of a league, kind of like your soccer or MLS or some other shit, right? Like, how much is a singular player actually going to move the needle? Well, in the NBA, it used to be a enormous fucking needle mover. Now it really can't be, as we see with Jokic and Luka and whatever. The short of it is, it always comes down to money, obviously. I don't think that the second part is actually going to outweigh in a monetary sense the potential revenues or opportunity costs of not investing in the growth stuff. So we're probably going to see some pretty wacky ideas coming from Adam Silver, especially with the expansion idea being the next sort of investment on the horizon. Now that he's ironed out the biggest media deal in NBA history, if you want to expand teams, but the product is harder for casual fans in those new markets to appreciate, you are definitely fighting opposing forces and maybe rectifying some of those potential concerns with new wrinkles or what have you, or you do what I would prescribe in my unprofessional opinion, which is let the playoffs speak for themselves. You've already bent over backwards engineering a pretty indisputably successful NBA Cup or in-season tournament that was designed to simply get guys to try, not be another playoffs, which I just think everybody wants to try and put in Adam Silver's mouth. No, I think it can just be a fun tournament to let the young, pretty bad teams try and actually compete for something before they have to tank for Cooper Flag or whoever. This is the first full season of the new CBA paradigm, which ultimately is designed to offer a more competitive and compelling playoff product. I think we're going to get to the playoffs. One, the actual teams that make it into the play-in or playoffs inevitably is just innately going to rock the boat a little bit. Two, the level of competition and parity inside of these playoff games and series is going to be nuclear. Fast forward to April, when we're going to get Wemby versus Jokic in the first fucking round, and everyone's going to be a complete 180 and say, oh, this is so fucking raw. And then you get the actual casual fans somewhat latched onto or invested in that particular playoff run, which implores and drives these overall storylines to carry it over into the following season. Listen, everybody has heard the old head complaints and ideology that the playoffs are the only thing that matters. Everybody load manages and no one cares about the regular season. Adam Silver implements the new CBA, getting teams to be more even-keeled, so you can't even afford to take the regular season off without risking your playoff positioning, which also leads to just inevitably more and more talented and competitive postseasons. More parity leads to more epic playoffs, which leads to more casuals being wowed by these hyper competitive teams who are actually competing at a very high level against some of the Titan dominant teams at the top of these conferences that all of these media talking heads are constantly pushing. Oh my God, OKC and Boston are heads and shoulders above every other team. Yeah, let's see the Titanic OKC Thunder, even at full strength in a first round series against the laughingstock Lakers this postseason. You know how fucking sick that playoff series is going to be if it were to happen? These teams are so fucking good, and every fucking game is gonna be must-see TV. I'm telling you right now, the overall CBA, consumers being turned off because they feel disconnected from what the league has become and the product and why they should watch it as new and yada yada. It's not paying dividends right now. Talk to me in the postseason when Wemby is matched up with Jokic in the first round of the fucking playoffs, and it is some of the sickest shit you, me, casual or not, or whoever, it doesn't fucking matter, gets to fucking watch that in the first round, and every single game is absolute dynamite. That is when the strategic vision of Adam Silver and the new CBA paradigm comes to fruition. We are in a slow, drudging regular season where sure there are offensive similarities that are mathematically proven to just be better offensively. Unless you want to start moving some fucking lines on the court around, it's just the way it is. But how you generate these open looks from three and whatever you can come up with and innovate, going to be a big part of the differentiator. But come the postseason, do not fucking do a 180 on this and be like, you know what? This fucking parody rocks, man. Fuck, it's just like the March Madness shit. This is so cool. I don't even know who's going to win this first round matchup with the Thunder and the Lakers. Watch. You fucking watch this shit happen right now. I'm telling you it's going to happen. This is the entire fucking vision for what is supposed to happen. And right now, we don't have anything better to talk about. It's just reaching this critical mass of talking in circles and pointing at three-pointers and pointing at no US-born generational superstar that's just blatantly xenophobic and kind of jarring. This whole, like, Europeans can't be the face of the league thing. I don't know, man. We're grown up on the internet, and we're kind of much more in tune with foreign cultures in general, or at least less afraid of them, or just weirded out by them. I know Jokic just doesn't give a shit, and that's just hard for the league to really lean on, but I just kind of feel like it's really fucking weird, and I think that whole thing is super overblown. All these games are going to come down to the last, 2 minutes of an absolute dogfight, and some of the best individual just superstar, I'm going to fucking carry this team for the super high pressure matchup that my small market team would have historically never had the chance to even stand a chance against a franchise like the Lakers. Yo, fuck that. Give me fucking Milwaukee Thunder, dude. That would be super cool. You know what I mean? I don't know. Those are my rambling thoughts on all this. I think to tie it all back with a nice little bow, because it's the holidays, the what behind the NBA product has evolved, which has therefore changed what most people might find most captivating about it. A lot of people feel disconnected from those changes that have organically taken place, leading to disillusionment and complaints online that are amplified by the platforms and institutions like the media that literally make a living by blowing up stories like these, regardless of how many people actually believe them, just to fill airtime and stir controversy. In my attempt to provide level-headed analysis of that whole paradigm is that a lot of the fruits of Adam Silver's vision for more parity in the NBA will come to bear in the postseason. We will see some of the most competitive playoff basketball and be sustained throughout the entirety of the postseason to a level we literally have never seen because of those actions that Adam Silver has taken to, again, drive more of this less superstar, more system-driven value proposition for current or potential consumers.